Okay, so we're going to start our lecture for this evening. And tonight we're covering active reconnaissance. There's 114 slides, so we'll see how far we get through this. Yeah, death by PowerPoint. I actually had an idea for a product a while back. You know how you're always in these meetings, you're watching PowerPoints and you start getting sleepy? You know, they used to have these alarm clocks that would reflect the time on the ceiling. So I thought maybe if you did that, change it and put PowerPoints in it instead, it would help you fall asleep because it would change through the PowerPoints. It'd work a lot better than counting sheep. So yeah, once we need to get into these slides and see what we can, what we actually really need to get down to review, because you know a lot of these slides are based on if you went somewhere and took a CompTIA class. This is normally like a 5-day long class, so a slide deck that you would have in class would be, you know, half a day in class, 4 hours. So we may have to go through, and you guys are reading the assignments and stuff, whereas people that are going through the class got the books to go along. They go through the materials, and when they get ready to prepare for the test, they can go back and reread chapters and things like that. So we'll just have to kind of get that figured out so that way you guys aren't having to watch as many PowerPoints. As we get through this, and we get through the reading content and these lectures from the Pentest Plus content, then we'll get into doing more hands-on stuff. So the plan is to be completed with the book by halfway through the semester. And then that way the rest of the semester is just working in labs and working on those pen tests that we have planned to experience. Because you know, once you get to doing those pen tests, you get to put together all these things that you learned during the class. And so that's why we added more pen tests this semester. Yes. Yeah, instructions for the labs that with the book are contained in the book. But as far as these other labs we have, they're pen test labs. So basically you can go in there. It's just an environment that you can run the tools against. And then we're also going to perform the pen test on those too. But yes, the book would have information on some of the labs. Because I just see some construction here. So. Yes. Yeah, that you'd follow along on your own. I'll have to look into that. And as you go, the download folder shows the information you need for it. If you don't have something, let me know. I need to look into those labs and kind of see, does anyone, well, I guess we're just kind of the first parts of these labs have been like documents on these first steps. We really haven't gotten to the technical stuff. So as we get into technical stuff, I know through there they've got like examples of pen test reports and other things and some other exercises. So, and so conducting active reconnaissance. So when you're starting a pen test, these are some of the things you're doing. You're scan your networks, enumerate targets, scan for vulnerabilities, analyze basic scripts. Sometimes you start a pen test, you may not have a list of IP addresses. It may be up to you to discover those. So part of this may be trying to discover your targets to begin with. Sometimes you may have a list of IPs to scan. So you may already have these IP addresses or domain names, URLs, host names to test against. And network scanning, this is the process of gathering information about computer systems on the network. First step in active reconnaissance, discovers potential vulnerable targets, post discovery port scanning, packet crafting, device enumeration, and vulnerability scanning. So one of the tools that I use a lot and you'll use a lot in this course is Nmap. That's probably one of the tools that you'll use the most. It's really, they have some scripts that come along with it, the NSE scripts, the Nmap scripting engine scripts, and those are pretty handy to use to actually discover what type of system is behind that port and what services are running on that. And Nmap is short for a network mapper, and this is the most widely used. It's probably one of the oldest maintained open source tools out there. And each summer they work to upgrade the tool and come up with new functionality. They kind of do like Google, these other corporations, and have like a summer of code where they get people to contribute to help improve the product. And it's available on most platforms. You can run on Windows, Linux, Mac OS. Basis for many vulnerability scanning, vulnerability testing products, commercial and open source. Can incorporate scripts, can evade IDSs by altering speed, performance, and settings. Host discovery, use this for Nmap. You can use it to discover hosts, port, and service discovery, operating system, service fingerprinting, enumeration, MAC detection, vulnerability and exploit detection. So this, once you have your systems, when you're trying to hack into a system, you need to know what ports are open, what services are running, the operating system. So during your enumeration or active reconnaissance, you're going through trying to collect this information. That target, the more successful you'll be in your exploitation of that system. This shows that you're scanning one address and scanning a domain name.
Hey Phil, we can't hear you.
Okay. Okay. For some reason I was muted. Okay. So you should be able to hear me okay now. Okay. So we'll go ahead and cover this slide again, just in case you didn't hear me. How far back did you guys not hear the presentation? Because it seemed like it just kind of cut out.
Maybe like 45 seconds to a minute, maybe.
Okay. So did you hear this slide right here? Did you get?
No.
No. Okay. We'll go back and we'll just go ahead and start back on here, network scanning. Thanks for letting me know, guys. Sorry about that. Network scanning, the process of gathering information about computing systems on a network. First step in active reconnaissance, discovers potential vulnerable targets, host discovery, port scanning, packet crafting, device enumeration, and vulnerability scanning. Nmap is short for network mapper, and it's available for most platforms. It comes installed by default on Kali Linux. You can install on Windows or Mac. There's even like a Zen map front end that you can use. If you like a GUI front end and you like a nice network maps, that's an add-on that you can use with Nmap. And let's see, a lot of commercial tools are based on it. Open source and commercial can incorporate scripts, can invade IDSs by altering speed and performance settings. And you can do host discovery, port discovery, and service discovery. Most of these you're going to use, a lot of times you're mainly going to be working in the port discovery and service discovery, as well as fingerprinting the OS. Enumeration, MAC address detection, vulnerability, and exploit detection. And so it just kind of shows you a high level syntax, Nmap, the scan type, options, and the target. Yes, it'll be more, it can be more, because they really didn't show many options, because like by default, you can just run like Nmap and the IP address of the targets you're testing, and that'll do just like a small subset. But if you want to do different types of scanning, then you add the different switches to do more in-depth scanning or to export to files or import from files. Importing from a file and exporting a file is really handy because you don't have to keep going back and rerunning your scans. So exporting it to a file is a good thing. And then if you have like an IP list, you may not have an entire subnet. Say like you've got like a list of IP addresses. So instead of having to go through and discover all those IPs, if you have a list of IP addresses, then you can actually import those files, pull those into Nmap, and scan those that way. So that's one of the options you can use. There's a lot of different tools. I do a lot of my vulnerability validation with Nmap. That's usually the first thing I'll start with. There's other tools out there that work, but I'll start with Nmap, see if there's an NSE script that works for that first off. Then if there's not, I'll look for other scripts. And sometimes there may be other scripts that work better than the Nmap NSE script, but you can bet there's a high probability that you're going to find something there from the Nmap scripts that'll work. It can, but if you like, there's different techniques you can use. You can slow down your scan speed. But honestly, it's going to kind of depend on what you're doing. If you're doing more of a red team type exercise, then you're going to be careful, try to stay quiet. And then from just a normal pen testing perspective, where it usually doesn't matter that much, you'll just want to make sure you're not scanning too fast to affecting the systems. And sometimes you can scan too fast, and sometimes you'll miss things. Your scans won't be as accurate. So I usually like to use about T4 for my scans. Once you get faster than that, then it starts kind of affecting what you pick up on your scans. It's the level of speed. Yeah, so -T and then a number from like 1 to 5 or 6 is the speed of the scan. There's some other scanners out there that are faster, like Masscan, but you have to be careful because you can end up DOSing systems with it. And you know, your target designations here, it's showing using a single IP address. Here they're showing like a host name, and then they're showing like a subnet. So you can do entire subnets either by IP address or domain names. And then here's the entire subnet. Scanning by host. Yes.
So you know, scan the whole internet.
Yes.
How is that? You're using some kind of tool to do that. Obviously not that.
Masscan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that work? How can you scan the whole internet?
It just scans like the most popular HTTP ports. I don't think it scans like every single possible port. I think it just scans like the top so many HTTP ports. Yeah, supposedly it does. It's supposed to. What's that?
How would you set the target on that?
Yeah, you would just. I would have.
What's the output?
I would have to look that up to see, but there's like.
What's the benefit of that?
If you're malicious, then it would be, you know, you could just find, if you're looking for, you know, HTTP hosts that you want to attack, then you can run that and get a list of hosts that way. It's really not useful. I mean, honestly, it's kind of more of a marketing tool, although it's a free tool. Masscan is free. It's kind of a selling point, but you can get a lot of IPs real quick. which mass scan works really good. It's like if you have a big IP range you need to scan and scan pretty quickly, then you could go through and just target like certain ports and go through to see if they're active. If you have like,
But it's doing.
someone just
It's
actually,
not doing in-depth scanning, right?
no, it's just basic scanning for open ports. Someone just put up here, Ben shared with us that port or 0.0.0.0 with a subnet of 0 that does scans the whole internet. So you can see if they're,
How long does that take?
it's supposed to take like, he said 4 minutes. I've heard like 5 or 6 minutes. It's supposed to do the whole internet. So you can go home and try it, but I would,
6 minutes if you have the proper.
I would do it for, through a proxy, because you don't want your ISP blocking your IP address. But
I
yeah.
imagine governments are doing this all the time,
Probably.
24/7.
Yeah, especially you take nation states and, malicious actors out there trying to find live IP addresses.
That's only IP4, that's not doing IP6.
Yeah, it's just IPv4. I don't know if you can do it.
IP6, that would be done.
Yeah. It really doesn't help much. I mean, if you pick specific ranges, or if you're trying to look for, I can see if you're trying to look for specific ports. Say, for instance, there's a big Apache Tomcat vulnerability. Normally it's on port 8080 or like 8081. There's different ports. So you could pick specific port ranges. If you're a malicious hacker and you're trying to find targets, then you may run them against a bunch of IPs on the internet trying to find specific targets, or you can look like in Showdown. But if you're like on a network internally, then you would want it specifically more to subnets, but you could, with something like mass scan, you could scan a little quicker. Yeah, someone just put up, said if you scan the whole internet, you'll be treading on some suspicious IP ranges like US.gov or North Korea. Yeah, you don't want to make some of them people mad. But I haven't actually tried that myself. And here's some of the different scan types.
You're not scanning for stuff, you're not scanning.
Just whatever's routable.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah, dark
to the internet.
web.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, just whatever's routable to the internet facing.
You need special tools to do it.
And Nmap scan types. If you run Nmap with the -H, that's how you get your help menu. You get the version, -V gives you the version. -D will give you enable debugging output, list every step Nmap is taking along with the output. And -low, that's a TCP send scan to see if target ports respond with a SYNAC port is open or a reset for the port is closed, also known as half open scan, as it does not complete the TCP three-way handshake. This is default for root users. And also with the lowercase s, uppercase T, this is complete TCP three-way handshake. Nmap asks the underlying operating system to establish a connection with the target on the specific port. Default or regular users. This is the default for regular non-root users. So some certain scans, if you're running on Kali Linux and you need to do certain things, sometimes you'll have to use, or Kali by default you're using is root, but some instances, different operating systems, you may have to use sudo to root to be able to get to perform certain types of tests. Let's see. Yeah, will a scan that big ever complete? If you're using mass scan, it would complete, but it's supposedly completes in like 5 or 6 minutes, and that's just scanning like HTTP ports, not really every single port. I don't know if you get rested 4 or 5 minutes, have to find you pretty quick, but I wouldn't chance it. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, it'd take them longer to find you. That
You do it in a library.
yeah, or use a proxy, because the malicious people aren't going out there using their own IP address. They're going to a coffee shop or using a proxy or something, or using a VPN. Because when I'm doing side pen tests or bug bounties on my own, I will a VPN, because I don't want to I don't want my ISP to get upset with me. And then number two, if you're scanning certain sites and you're not whitelisted, then there's a good chance your IP could get blocked. So I'll go through my VPN client from time to time and just switch locations on the VPN. And so a lot of malicious attackers, they'll proxy through several different proxies. So they'll chain different proxies. So they'll go through a proxy here, and so you have several different proxies, making it hard for them to be caught. You just connect to the VPN. I connect to the VPN. It's the VPN provider that I use. Yeah. So it's just basically so I connect to it, and then my outbound, their default gateway or outbound IP address will give me a different IP address going outbound. Yeah.
Anonymize all your traffic and pop out somewhere else in the world.
Yeah. Some people use like Tor and that kind of stuff for that too.
And it's basically Tor, but from public.
Yeah. But me,
yeah.
Yeah, for me, I've always worked for legitimate companies and stuff, so I've never really messed with Tor and that kind of stuff, because
The government hates Tor, but they use it.
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22. They hate people using Tor, but they use it themselves.
you're slowing down their bandwidth.
Well, yeah, because they find themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They own some of the nodes.
Yeah.
So they decrypt what they want.
And here's another, continue our scan types. Lowercase s, uppercase v is for service scan. Probe open ports to determine service. I like to use this one a lot. And to conduct a UDP scan, it's lowercase s, uppercase u. Ports respond that are open. Ports that send no response back, displayed as open, filtered, or unknown. Ports send ICMP unreachable target is closed. S, lowercase s, uppercase L is a list of targets to be scanned. And let's see, SA, this should, let's see, lowercase s, uppercase A, find out if a host network is protected by a firewall. Filtered results indicate firewall is on. Unfiltered indicate this port is accessible but might be open or closed. Okay. Nmap options, come back here. Okay, -P for port range. Okay, so you can specify, if you don't leave any port, if you don't specify a port, it does like a certain range. You can do like top 100, and right here they're showing -P for port range. So here they're showing just like port 80 that they're scanning on, and the next example they're using like port 80 and 443. So if you're doing a website and they're only open ports are 80 and 443, then you're covering all those ports there. You can do like shows the next one, like from port 1024 to 3000. So you can do, port ranges that way. You can do a mixture too. You can actually sit there and put specific ports, and then you can actually put a port range, port 443 to 2000 or whatever. So you can actually mix these different types. And this next method, they show where they're using UDP ports. So you're using an uppercase U, colon, and the UDP ports. And then you also see that they're specifying the TCP ports by an uppercase T and a colon, and then listing the TCP ports. And the last one, if you're scanning all 65K ports, then this is a good option right there. It's -P, but you add a dash after it to test all the ports. And when you're doing segmentation testing for like PCI or something, then it's required to scan all 64K ports. And let's see, here's some more options. Continued. More of these things that so a lot of these, if you're actually out testing some of these things, you kind of won't use as often. There'll be like a certain set of switches that you use, options that you use, and then you're kind of used to them that you pretty much use over and over again. But then maybe you run into something you're not finding enough information, then you can switch that up. But here they show scan ports consecutively, not randomized. So this will actually scan the ports in order if you use just -R and top ports. So this option right here is --top ports, and the number of ports you want to test. So you're testing the top 100. And so this way you can get a good amount of popular ports tested without having to do a full 65K. There's some cases where you may want to do a quick scan just to see what's open and not go in depth, just to see, like leave your service scans off just to look for open ports, and then you can expand that. And let's see, okay. And then you can dig a little deeper, because a lot of times you'll do like an initial scan, find open ports, and then you can go back on those certain hosts that seem to have a good number of ports open, and then you can scan all 65K. Sometimes scanning can take a long time. We've got scans that we've run at work that runs like days, and I'm talking not a whole lot of IP addresses you're testing, but just the firewall rules that are on those systems, or the firewalls that the host-based firewalls that are protecting those systems, or just regular firewalls rules may be in place, and sometimes you run into some problems that slows down your scans.
You write those to an output text file so you have it?
Yes, yeah. I like to use the -lowercase-o uppercase A, because that gives you all three formats. There's like a greppable format, which I'm sure we'll cover in here, and then there's an XML format, and then just the regular Nmap format. With the XML format, if you got the right XML plugin installed on your browser, then you can open up the XML file, and it actually will color code the different ports. Stuff that's more risky or more critical type ports are open will show up as red. So they actually color code it based on criticality, and it's kind of a nice little way to be able to view those IP addresses, opposed to just opening up in a text editor.
Can you read that what was that? You said uppercase what?
It's a -lowercase-o uppercase A, and then you give your file name, and that just gives you the three different output types. Okay, and then let's see, this next one, for your scanning for IPv6, then you add -6. And for anyone that's interested, that at my Pwn School meetup, the Wednesday after next, we got a guy coming in the third Wednesday of the month. He's doing a talk on IPv6 hacking. He's like one of the local experts on IPv6. He's done several talks like at Dallas Hackers and different conferences. So he's going to be there, and he's going to be talking on hacking with IPv6. Yeah, it doesn't have a handle. It's Jeff Carroll is his name. And then here's like, if you're scanning from a file, you use -lowercase-i uppercase L, and then you just put in the path to the IP addresses you're scanning. And then exclude. So if you've got, like, you're doing a subnet and there's a few hosts that you want to exclude, you can use --exclude to exclude certain IP addresses from the scan. Maybe you've got a mainframe in there and you want to be careful not to cause any problems with it, any outages, then you can use that exclude command. And -n does not resolve names, and that saves time. So if you got a large number of scans, this can be helpful. -uppercase-R attempts to resolve names with reverse DNS lookup. And -uppercase-F is for fast mode. Scan fewer ports than default. So this is also kind of controls the number of ports that you're scanning. Options continued. -uppercase-O. This one enables OS detection. Nmap will guess, but it's not always accurate. And -uppercase-A enables OS detection. service detection, script scanning, and trace route. So if you want to do service scanning and OS detection, uppercase A is a good option to use. Let's see, version, version intensity. This goes through, let's see, this specifies level of interrogation from 0 being light to 9 being try all probes. This next one here is to use a script, how I mentioned the NSE script that stands for Nmap scripting engine. And so there's different ones depending on the type of system you're testing. There's like several SMB scripts that you can use and SNMP scripts, different things pertaining to encryption and certificates that you can also use with these NSE scripts. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. Usually there's a vulnerability out there. They usually have some kind of script to test for the vulnerability. And lowercase s, uppercase C, that uses all default scripts. So this won't make you use all of them, but it'll use like some of the default scripts, so you can run this in your scan. The scripts will help you find a little more information that you normally might not find. And -V is increased verbosity output, and VV is very verbose output. And here's some of the we're talking about earlier, the outputting file names. Let's see, -ON is normal.
How does OG make it different? Any text file would be grippable.
It's just the format. I can't give the specifics on it, just the format.
Okay, I have to look at it and figure it out, because grep is really cool if you're only looking for one thing.
Yeah.
Nmap talks a lot.
Yeah, I use grep a lot on Nmap, looking for certain, if you got like a lot of scans that you've done, but you can see where you can do the individual type of files, or you can use the lowercase o, uppercase A to do all the formats. And it doesn't take any extra time to provide those extra files. And let's see. Discovery scans. Discovery scan, a type of scan that finds live IP addresses on a network. Ping sweep, a network scanning technique that uses ICMP echo request packets to search for live hosts. This is another thing when you're doing tests, if you do like a ping sweep to find live IPs, that can kind of help cut down your time. Then you can take those live hosts and just scan against those. And let's see, here we're showing how to do this with Nmap. Let's see, uppercase PR sends ARP requests to target to see if there's a response. ARPs are generally not blocked by firewalls. This is the default discovery method for any Nmap scan on an Ethernet LAN. -SN, no port scan. So discovery only using combination ICMP echo request, TCP send on port 443, TCP ACK on port 80, and ICMP timestamp requests. And uppercase PS, let's see, discover host by sending a TCP send to specified ports. Default is 80. Any response, ACK, send, or reset indicates the target is up. There can be no space between the P and S and the port list. See, we would be followed by will be followed by a port scan unless S-N is used, and that's all lowercase. And here they show kind of the output of a scan. So they're using the script, the target sniffer script, and they're setting the arguments for that target sniffer script to time out at 60 seconds. And then the interface they're testing on is ETH0. Port scanning, a process of determining which TCP and UDP ports on a target are listening or on. First step, enumerating services. Most common techniques to connect via TCP three-way handshake. Scanner resets the connection once made, does not work for UDP ports, connectionless. All ports or selected ports. Scan results can provide information about type of computer, operating system, and available systems. Makes me think of a joke. I have a UDP joke for you, but you wouldn't get it.
What'd you say?
I have a UDP joke for you, but you wouldn't get it. Bad joke. Okay, let's see here. And here shows some common ports. These are kind of good to get familiar with. And one of the things, if you ever do any pen testing, you'll get to learn these ports pretty well just from the test. You scan some of these enough, you'll become familiar with those ports, but sometimes people will put things on odd ports trying to make it more secure. And there's some lists out there that you can find on ports. Here's different ports, continued. So I haven't looked that far into it, but if you're going to do the pen test plus test, I'm sure a lot of these ports would be on there on the test. And here they show like a demo of where they ran Nmap against a host, and it shows the different ports open. So once you run Nmap, that's the thing about the ports, you don't necessarily have to know what the different ports are, because Nmap will tell you what those ports are, unless the service is.
So we know that's a Linux machine because it has 111 and it doesn't have 135.
Yeah. And here's another scan right here. Let's see. So at least they're on a fairly new version of Nmap on there, 7.70. And stealth scans, dash lowercase s, uppercase s. The original stealth scan, send a TCP send. If the target responds with a SYNAC, do not complete the handshake, but instead a reset. This is likely to be logged by the target. And the next option here is uppercase A, send TCP ACK, used to map out firewall rule sets, determine which ports are filtered, if a firewall is stateful or not. And uppercase N, send a TCP segment with no flags raised. This is not the normal state for TCP, which always has at least one flag, usually ACK raised, used to sneak through stateful firewalls. And uppercase F option, send a TCP FIN, used to sneak through non-stateful firewalls. And uppercase X, send a TCP segment with a FIN, PSH, and URG flags, thus lighting up the packet like a Christmas tree. This is a logical combination used to sneak through a non-stateful firewall. And stealth scans continued. Uppercase P, lowercase n, skip discovery, assume all hosts are online for the port scan. Useful if targets have their firewall up and only other services on unusual ports. Sometimes you run Nmap scan, it'll come back and tell you to use this option that the results may not be accurate. For some reason, it's detecting things on the other end that you need to use the skip discovery option. And the next option is S, lowercase s, uppercase L, conducts a blind TCP port scan, idle scan. No packets are sent directly from the attacker. It uses a zombie middleman host to obtain information about open ports on the target. You have to spend some time identifying machines that can act as a zombie. Once you locate a good zombie, you can reuse it for more scans. And let's see, dash B, FTP relay and FTP target, conduct FTP bounce scans, exploit FTP proxy connections in which a user asks a middleman FTP server to send files to another FTP server because of widespread abuse. The FTP relay feature has been disabled by most vendors. And here we get into some of the timing of the speeds of the scans. Uppercase T, 0 through 5, Uses different timing templates to throttle the speed for your queries to make the scan less noticeable. Choose from 0 the slowest to T5 the fastest. Nmap also refers to these speeds as paranoid, sneaky, polite, normal, aggressive, and insane, respectively. T0 and T1 are the best for IDS evasion, but very slow. T5 has been reported to be unstable because too fast. T4 is the recommended choice for fast scan that is still stable. T4 is the default. -F splits packets, including pings and 8-byte fragments, to make it harder for packet filtering firewalls, intrusion detection systems to detect the purpose of the packets. MTU is the maximum fragment size. -D, and you have like your decoy 1, 2, 3, and continue to more than that, and your target. Used to mask a port scan using decoys, creates bogus packets from the decoys, so the actual attacker blends in with the crowd. It looks like both decoys and the actual attackers are performing the attack. In this example, the IP address is the target, the .50 address. The other IPs are the decoys.
Are you using that mostly when you're inside a network or outside?
That would be like inside of a network. Just this would be something you'd use like more like on a red team kind of exercise, just trying to hide your traffic. And let's see, stealth scan options, -E for interface, specify the interface Nmap should use. So you have a multi-home system, you can define, say if your multi-home system, you could be plugged into 2 different networks, you can define which one you're wanting to scan from. -S, spoof source address. Spoof the source address will not return useful reports to you. Target responses will be sent to spoofed address, but can be used to confuse an IDS or target the administrator. --spoof-mac, and use bogus source hardware address, also used as media access control. You can specify random MAC based on vendor or explicitly specify the MAC address. First example creates a random Apple hardware address. So I guess if you could spoof that you're like a Cisco router or something to kind of throw off people from catching you. Randomize hosts, randomize the order hosts are being scanned. And --proxies, comma, separated list of proxy URLs. This may be handy from the outside. Relay TCP connections through a chain of HTTP or SOCKS4 proxies, especially useful on the internet.
Can I ask a question about previous slide?
Sure.
The spoof source port.
Yes.
Let's say you're having trouble getting through,
Mhm.
doing Nmap, and you see it has some ports are open. Then you could spoof one of those.
Yes.
And you'd have more success.
Yeah, you could try that just to see if it gets around.
Okay.
You're welcome. And if you're interested in taking the certification test for Pentest Plus, then you'll need to know the Nmap ports pretty well. I'm going through a practice exam for that, and they cover the different Nmap switches. From what I would think, I think it's going to be some of the more common stuff. I don't think it's going to be all the different switches, although I would, make sure to cover those to prepare for it. But from the practice test, which was actually I'm using, I think it was created by CompTIA, or created for them specifically, not a third party, and they cover a lot of the different Nmap switches and options in there. Full scan.
And as far as these scans are goes, like, do you need to know all of them, like for the exam purposes, for the test purposes? What you're talking?
Yeah, I would try to know all of them, because who knows what they're actually going to cover on the test. Once you kind of get through there, some of the basic things, concepts, you'll look at the different switches, and you can look at how they work together. So when you combine certain things, that does a certain type of scan. So as you work on those, there's some different cheat sheets out there for Nmap that you can go over, and probably some stuff within the materials too that you can go through and just kind of get used to those, work on learning those. And full scans, a type of scan that lists the maximum amount of information from and about a target, scans all ports, interrogates services for version information, footprint OS, other actions, produce the most results, but most likely detected. Evasion tactics include randomization of IP address and ports, and slowing the scan itself. So this one, they mentioned, this one is a good chance you're gonna get detected, but most of the time you're doing a pen test that you're really not concerned with getting detected unless you're doing a red team exercise. Packet crafting, the practice of alternating normal IP packet before transmission in a network to test firewall rules, evade intrusion detection, or cause a denial of service attack. Goal, use a few packets as possible to reach your objective. 4-stage process, packet assembly, packet editing, packet play, packet decoding. Different tools can be used, command line, GUI, and scripts. And here it shows they're using HP to craft a packet. Network mapping, the process of discovering devices on the network, an effort to visualize the network and create logical topology map. Active probing to gather MAC address, IP addresses, port services, OSs, device types, VMs, host names, protocols. And you'll see when you when you set up a home lab or test in these labs, a lot of times when you're scanning virtual machines, you'll get information back letting you know that it's running on running a virtual machine. Identify subnets and device interconnection methods, Nmap, ARP cache interrogation, routing and MAC tables, CDP neighbor tables. Network mapping, topology map provides insight to tools, strategies for pen test. Default mapping is usually the local subnet. Many mapping tools are available. And some of these things, like you can use some of the, like Nmap, it will show you, it does some mapping in it as well. And Metasploit. This is commonly used for exploits, but in this one, they're talking about more looking for the enumeration Recon side of things. It also has a lot of good auxiliary modules, some things similar to like the Nmap NSE scripts. You're able to detect certain vulnerabilities. You're able to look for like anonymous FTP. So this is a really good tool also to validate vulnerabilities with. But the modularity lets you mix and match and create optimal tool sets. De facto exploit framework. It's like one of the only free exploit frameworks out there. Most of the companies charge for theirs. 4 editions: framework, community, express, and pro. Framework and community are free. Pro costs money. The express is a new one. I haven't heard of the express version. And it's interesting, used to with Metasploit, the older versions, there used to be like a web front end for it. But now you can kind of use like Armitage, which Armitage is a kind of a GUI front end that works with Metasploit. And it's actually the commercial product is called Cobalt Strike, which is using a lot of red teaming. But here it lists these as GUI spinoffs from Rapid7. So the Armitage and Cobalt Strike, they still use Metasploit in the background, use Metasploit modules. It just makes it a little easier to exploit systems, and it can kind of give you a little map of the systems that you discover with Metasploit. So that one's kind of fun to play around with. If you're in labs and you can't get into something, usually you can run what they call a Hail Mary with Armitage, and it'll find every vulnerability in that system and launch and exploit every single exploit. And if there's a possibility to get in there, a lot of times Armitage will help you get in there. And the module types are exploits, payloads, post modules, auxiliary, encoders, and Nmap.
What's the difference between framework and community?
The community is, you can run from the command line, but it kind of gives you like the GUI interface. It's kind of a web GUI.
But no more functionality.
Nah, just the web front end
Okay.
compared to the framework. When I got started in pen testing, it's funny how this works because a lot of consulting companies, they don't, for some reason, they don't spend a lot of money on tools. And it's kind of funny because they're making money off of it, but I've heard of consulting companies that do buy the tools, but I would go work for a customer and they would have some better tools than what we did. And we always, anywhere I worked, we've always had the free version of Metasploit, the Metasploit framework. And so where I'm at now, we have the pro version. But I'm so used to using the free version command line, I don't use the pro version. The advantages to the pro version is if you have Rapid7's vulnerability scanner, which is Nexpose, you're able to find vulnerabilities and like go from that scanner into Metasploit. So you can like click something to exploit it, whereas it's a more manual process if you're using Nessus and Metasploit. But it helps automate and make things a little bit easier. But fortunately, it's really good to start out with like the framework. Even if you're somewhere that uses the pro version, it's good to understand how to do the more manual version, although Metasploit's not really a manual exploit method, and it's a lot more customizable than some of the expensive products because there's so many things that you can use Metasploit for. You can use it to create shells to connect to servers. You can encode your payloads. You can do different things to bypass antivirus. And here, like encoders, is one of the things. They just recently came out with a new version of Metasploit, which is the first major version in like 8 years. And now they're starting to use like Python in it more. They've got more built-in evasion. A lot of times before you have to use like the MSS Venom, which is one of the tools to do evasion, but I'm not really sure on all the tools yet, but there's other components in there that help you evade detection. A lot of times you would use like the VEL framework or some of the other frameworks to help evade being captured. And here's a kind of an example of Metasploit that show how you load the module. So here they're using MS17010 PSExec. This is based on the Eternal Blue vulnerability exploit. And they're using PSExec. Excuse me?
You still see that vulnerability out there a lot?
Yeah, I did a pen test on the side over Christmas and found that vulnerability. Use this exact vulnerability.
That came out before. I'm just
Yeah.
curious if you still see it.
Yeah, I actually saw this, and it was like a Fortune 500 company. It was run on XP, and it's interesting because MS0867, which normally works, and then there's another decom vulnerability for XP that normally works, and it wouldn't work on there, but Eternal Blue worked on it. I used this exact exploit. Yeah. So I got in there, and you were able to. I didn't even have to use. I didn't have to even elevate privileges. What was already at system, NT system authority. But this makes it a lot easier because you can just imagine with all these exploit frameworks, it would take a lot more. It would be a lot more work for people to use manual exploits because there's some out there that are just scripts that you run a script against the system to exploit it. But with Metasploit, they've made it easier, and then a lot of people in the community that don't even work for Rapid7 will create modules based on exploits. That's just like this particular one, and a lot of the Eternal Blue modules, someone out in the community just wrote a Metasploit module for it. Guidelines for scanning networks. Use OSINT or other starting knowledge of the target network to determine base address for your scan. Determine the amount of detail you want to discover, such as IP addresses, ports, services, versions, host names, operating systems, device status, etc. And select a tool that is capable of delivering the desired information. Start with a discovery scan and use multiple techniques, not just ICMP echo request. Manually add known network address, or manually add known networks or just use shorter subnet masks to include multiple subnets in a single scan. Set scan speed that balances performance with stability. Use slower scan speeds to be polite and not create too much noise on the network. That's one of the things go back to when you're doing pen testing, is whether you're for your company or a consultant, you always want to be careful not to take systems down. Because if you're a consultant, they're not going to want you to come back if you come in and take a lot of stuff offline. So you want to be careful. And for me, it's been a no-brainer. I worked as a sysadmin for almost 7 years, so I respect, what they have to go through to restore these systems in an outage like that. So you always want to be careful. And also when you're going through using the different Metasploit modules, make sure you're careful, because some of those be not denial of service. So it usually has DOS on there. If you look at the information, it'll say denial of service. I had a pen test I did one time, and fortunately I didn't get in trouble for it, but one of my first pen tests, we're on a customer site, and I found a vulnerability for that particular, or a exploit for that particular vulnerability, ran against that system, and then found out that it was a DOS module that it rebooted the system.
Can you tell us how reliable this operation system detection?
It's usually pretty reliable. It can be off sometimes. Sometimes it may not be 100%, but I would say I would guess 90%.
And that's the minus capital O.
Oh, minus, that's for the output.
What's
Oh, minus capital O. Yeah, that's for operating system. Yeah, that does operating system. And if you do like A, that does like operating system and script. So that's a good option too. And you can lower those down. You can use multiple switches. Some people will use it. And I find myself, there's combinations I use instead of doing some of the switches that encompasses everything. So I may do like uppercase O and the dash SV for service and break it out that way instead of using like all uppercase A. And use the slowest scan speed to evade detection of IDS. And this all depends on whether you're doing red teaming, the time that you got to test and all that. Add or include a port scan to identify listening ports on discovered hosts. If desired, use tools that can interrogate ports, grab banners, and use specially crafted packets to identify operating systems, services, versions. If desired, use tools that can interrogate device ARP caches, route tables, switch MAC tables, and other sources for additional network information. If desired, use WMI and SNMP to interrogate devices for services or component specific information. You can get a lot of information from SNMP. You run against Windows systems, sometimes you can see like running services and all sorts of stuff. So this is where some of these tools come in handy. If you got a system that only port 161 is open, a few other ports, but if 161 is open with the SNMP port, there's times you can pull information that the ports are closed or being filtered, you may not otherwise be able to identify, but running some of these tools, like some of the Nmap NSE scripts, and like 161 is another one of the scripts for testing for SNMP. So a lot of times you can find information about that system, even if the ports are closed, by using other tools. If a standardized diagram is desired, export the scan output and import into professional drawing applications such as Microsoft Visio. Use Google for quick find examples, tool guidance. Recognize that some online guidance may be outdated. Previously, you physically, okay, activity. This is kind of going over some scenarios. And enumeration, the process of querying devices or services for information about its configuration and resources. Critical part of active reconnaissance, can be accomplished remotely. Credentialed or non-credentialed, average user credentials can be effective. Common information revealed during enumeration, OS details, user and user group names, email addresses, contact information, host names, domain information, and IP addresses, volumes and shares, services, policies, audit settings, configuration settings, routing, MAC, and neighbor tables, install applications, patch levels, components and drivers, printers and print jobs, running process, registry keys, event logs, DNS, and SMP information. Common enumeration targets, servers, routers, switches, network services. Banner grabbing, enumeration tactic that involves trying to open a session with a service and getting service to identify itself. So there's many tools out there. You can, like your FTP banners, if you connect to an FTP server, even if you don't have an account, if you were just to try to log in FTP wise, just connect to it, you can get some of the banner information. Nmap will grab banners for you. You can actually use like Netcat to connect on that to that service to get banners, which is kind of a little more tedious way of doing that, because you have to do, like if it's HTTP, you have to do the GET request, do like a manual HTTP request to get this information. There's other tools out there a little bit easier to do that, but I would make sure to know this if you're going to take the exam. And here they show also using Nmap to get service banners, which is good. Also, commands like curl are good for getting HTTP banners. And so here they show some banners from running the service command within. Okay, yeah, you're actually running service and you're using the script, NSE script, to get the banners. And some CTFs to kind of train people to get used to looking for banners. Some of the CTFs you do, if you're doing Nmap scans, watch for banners and stuff like that, because sometimes they'll have information or flags listed in those sometimes. So they do that kind of to get people working towards looking at the banners. Popular enumeration tools for Windows hosts, built-in commands and utilities, Nmap, RPC client, Metasploit, command line commands, dirv to list the directories, ipconfig, ARP, route print, net user, local group administrator, and net share. And here's some list of PowerShell commandlets: get command, get local user, get local group member, get website, get child item. This PowerShell stuff is a really good area to learn, because before PowerShell gained popularity and a lot of the tools came out of PowerShell, people mainly tested from Kali Linux. So it's good to also know the ways of doing these things on Windows, because a lot of times you can do Windows related tasks easier on a Windows machine than you can on Linux. In here, they show some examples of host enumeration. You can see where they're doing like a operating system scan, a service scan, and then they're also using one of the SMB host discovery NSE scripts in Nmap. And they show some examples of RPC client and some examples with Metasploit. So here they're using SMB lookup SID. So you can see the information that they pulled with that from that. Or actually looks like you're set. This is the options that you need to set for that particular module. Popular enumeration tools, Metasploit modules, Nmap scans, RPC client. Linux host enumeration, built-in bash commands. Bash is really powerful. So on those operating systems, Windows, learn the Windows command line, understand that, as well as PowerShell. And then on Linux, bash is very powerful. Built-in bash commands, uname-a. This gives you the version of the Linux that's running on it. And then you have host name, route, ARP, ifconfig. This is the Linux equivalent to the IP config on Windows. Netstat commands, IP tables, mount, and package -L or I. This is for installing. You can use that to install packages. Okay, the dpackage -L that lists the packages that are installed. That's like an Ubuntu command, which you can install some tools using dpackage on Linux as well. I mean, Kali Linux. And you have Apache 3-V. So it just gives you the different, you can cat the Etsy password to see the passwords, cat Etsy group to get the groups, cat Etsy shadow to get the encrypted passwords. So you can get like the password hashes. If you can gain access to that, then you can try to crack the password hashes on Linux. And users command, who am I, ID, sudo-I, find head name. So it's different grep commands and find commands that you can use to enumerate Linux hosts. And there's some tools out there too, like Enum for Linux, I believe, and Linux Enum that will do a lot of these commands within a script that'll pull all this information for you. Okay, service and application enumerations. So here we see that the different applications run and service run on those ports. So FTP on port 21, SSH on port 22, TCP 23 for Telnet, and SNMP on port 25. And it shows you some different tools for those to use against those particular ports and services. And if you keep looking, they actually have listed the different NSE scripts. So you keep looking through, you'll keep seeing NSE scripts listed a lot. That's very powerful. Nmap is a very powerful tool. And port 53 DNS. So we got a list of DNS tools there that you can use to enumerate DNS. Port 80. So we have some more stuff here listed. Dirbuster, that's a really good one for looking for file content and directories within HTTP. And let's see, there's HTTP enum, some more NSE scripts related to that. Also, curl is another one I don't see listed. That's pretty good with HTTP. And have RPC listed, port 135, which is what you see on Microsoft, and then port 111. Here you see some popular SNMP and NetBIOS ports and SNMP, as I mentioned earlier. And you see some of the LDAP related ports and services here. And then you have SQL Server. And then your network shares. These are good places to find information because a lot of times people will keep usernames and passwords on network shares. One of the things we run into a lot too is IBM WebSphere, and some of the configuration files just have the passwords are just XORed, so you can just decode those pretty easy. So you can find all sorts of stuff there. And also, like Tinker was mentioning the other night too, when you're doing a pen test, it's not always about getting rid of your domain admin. Sometimes it's about the information you get. So digging through these file shares, you can find PII information, social security numbers, credit card information, that kind of stuff by going through those directories and passwords to possibly get into other areas. Here they're showing the show mount directory to look at shares. Network share enumeration options using RPC client, net share enum, net share enum all, net share get info, and using Metasploit. There's some of the modules listed there that you could use, SNMP enum shares and enum users, using share enum. A connection type that allows any clients to connect, make an authenticated connection to the IPC, inter-process communication share on the host, enables enumeration via SMB, Windows versions before 2000, older Unix and Linux allow this. And they show like the syntax to do this. to use get to the IPC share. Website. Does anyone need to take a break? Or we'd go ahead and take like a quick 5 or 10 minute break if you want.
Maybe like yeah, sound isolation. I want this assistant sounds. Yeah, I know some of it, but just wanted to be. नहीं, over. I do work as a stock center with the stock center, so we didn't not invent a set, so there were defenses like malware analysis, malware. We took the service to the class, but I didn't use it. अच्छा हिंदी में क्या हो रहा है after the दो दोस्त हैं दो I just started making those are tools इसके अंदर
How many lab hours do you think it would take to finish all of the work in this class?
It depends. Well, man, that's kind of tough to say because the Pen Test Plus part's kind of new. Those other labs, I said they were kind of older. I had students that went through those things over and over and put in a lot of time. I had one student that didn't have much experience in that area, but he learned it because he went through, there's like 18 labs and he went through, I forget how many times through it, but he learned through repetition.
Yeah, that's a good one. So finishing the work in the time allotted is not a problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
People were repeating it.
Yeah. At the time, we didn't, when we got those labs, they were not fully functional until like last semester.
Yeah.
So these newer labs, like I was showing you earlier,
Yeah.
those weren't fully functional until like last semester.
Repetition is absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, you know how complex Cisco command line is.
Mhm.
If you don't use that stuff 4, 5, 6 months, it's out of your head.
Yeah. I'd say learning Nmap syntax is not going to be as bad as Cisco.
No.
Yeah. 'Cause I took a CCNA class once, and I know it was easier to remember the Nmap stuff than it was the Cisco
I
command
have
line.
seen the CCNA material now, and I passed it in 1999. And basically, if you knew what a subnet was, you could get your CCNA.
I got mine around that time too. It was like 99 or 2000.
Yeah.
I got mine.
There was some bright red book, like study notes or something.
Okay.
For like $20, that's all I had. I just read the book a few times.
I had a friend that,
Not like that
One
now.
of the Lamb teaches that now, it says you can know everything else and fail if you don't know subnet.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. See,
You
when
can
I-
know everything else in the curriculum.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
fail at
no,
it
it's
and subnet.
great. When I get people trying to work with me in vulnerability management, I'll ask them some subnet questions first. How many, what's the block size of the /29, you know? And if they can't tell me, I'm like, go sit over there.
Yes, it is, it's really important.
You don't know what are the hosts you should be scanning. City only seems to know about 2 subnets. The other ones we use are 30 and 28. It's not supposed to be like that.
okay. So it looks like everyone's back. So I guess we'll get started. So we're covering website enumeration. Website enumeration discovers web server resources and underlying technology, helps you choose more effective attack vectors, which is any enumeration is going to do that, helps you exploit specific vulnerabilities in a web server. Browsers, open a browser to popular directory names, no HTTP response codes, any directories that don't return 404 code exists. Nmap scripts for popular web apps already exist. Use Nmap -S uppercase V for non-standard port ranges. Here's a good tool right here, Dirbuster. And this, some of this functionality is built into a WASP Zap, which is a web application testing tool. And you can use that same technology. I think they took the same coding and built it into that. There's also dirb, which you can run from the command line. And there is a tool written in Go called GoBuster that's a really popular one too that does the same thing. So you're able to go through there. You can find like backup files, maybe there may be configuration information in backup files, just different files that sometimes people don't password protect properly, restrict those areas and those directories that you're able to find information that can help you get into the system. Guidelines for enumerating targets. Remember that you can enumerate information from network devices as well as computers. Banner grab to obtain quick information from a service, a network service. Use different tools such as Nmap, Netcat, Telnet, or flexibility and different results when banner grabbing. If possible, obtain a credential, preferably administrator, that you can use during enumeration for maximum flexibility. Log on to the host you want to enumerate, then run native commands or tools such as RPC client or Metasploit. If you must enumerate remotely, conduct a port scan to discover targets. When enumerating Windows host, use tools such as the command prompt to access a wide range of commands. You can also use PowerShell, RPC client, and Metasploit. When enumerating Linux host, use the bash prompt for access to a wide range of tools. You can also use Metasploit. When enumerating different services, select tools that is designed for the ports and protocols that you're targeting. Scan the network for both SMB and NSF shares. Try creating null sessions on older hosts that provide SMB shares. Choose enumeration tools, tool that is configured to use the protocol. Start website enumeration by attempting to open a browser to well-known website directories. Use tools such as Nmap, Dirbuster to enumerate or to help enumerate directories and websites. Use a variety of tools, as not all tools will work with all targets. And sometimes you can be testing a certain protocol and a tool will work better at that time than other tools. Vulnerability scans. Vulnerability, the weakness that might or not be exploited. Vulnerability scan, a reconnaissance tactic that sends specially crafted packets or commands to a service to see how it responds. CVE numbers for known vulnerabilities. Scan open ports to see if listening services are vulnerable to attacks. General and specific scanners available. Scanner capabilities. Exploit and collect evidence. Select target types. Use output from port scans to narrow focus. You can take like the output from port scans to narrow the focus, but also you can also take you can run a vulnerability scan, which vulnerability scans will test for open ports in services running on a system. So it'll do a lot of things that Nmap will do, like in this one tool. Some people will actually just not run Nmap, so you'll run like a Nessus vulnerability scan and look for vulnerabilities, and say like if you're not finding a whole lot of stuff, then you may have to resort to more manual methods, running like your port scanners like Nmap, scanning for service and ports. In some cases, you can start off with just a vulnerability scanner and see what you find if you're not. And then you can dig down, because as you go through that vulnerability scan, you can find possible targets based on what you've discovered, the different OSs and applications running. Sometimes I've found things with little command line utilities that something like Nessus wasn't able to find. One of the tools I really like to use is Nikto, and it's a command line web application or web server testing tool that you run from the command line. It'll find like default or easy guess credentials and different vulnerabilities that you can run from the command line and find stuff sometimes that a vulnerability scanner won't find. I've had tests where I ran Nessus and didn't find anything, but saw that it was like Apache Tomcat, and so I ran Nikto against it and it was able to find some things that Nessus didn't find. So it's always good to use a combination of tools. Commonly used vulnerability scanners. OpenVAS, this is open source and free. You can download and install. It's on Kali Linux. And we've got that installed as well as Nessus, Nexpose, and Nexpose Community Edition. I didn't realize that they had a community edition of Nexpose. That'd be interesting. Nexpose is by Rapid7, the company that makes Metasploit. Retina Community, Retina is another scanner. That one's been out for a long time. I hadn't really heard that one in a long time. And MBSA is the Microsoft-based security analyzer. So you can run this like against your systems, and it'll show you missing patches and different security vulnerabilities. This is a tool by Microsoft. Back in my sysadmin days, we used to use this a lot to kind of test some of the systems because we didn't have vulnerability scanners that we could personally use. So we would use this. Nessus is made by Tenable. It's also referred to as Tenable. But Tenable is the company that makes Nessus. Nessus at one time was actually open source, and OpenVAS is a fork from Nessus. Someone took one of the older versions of Nessus and forked it over and created OpenVOS with it. And then Nmap NSC scripts, this can be used for vulnerability scanning. Compliance scans. These are vulnerabilities. These are scans that are basically that are required by policy, laws, different compliance, regulatory compliance, that these have to be done. You know, a lot of companies, or a lot of their testing is based on PCI. A lot of pen tests here lately, a lot of in Europe is GDPR, since that has come into life. A lot of tests are done based on that. So a lot of times, a lot of things are driven by compliance. You would hope that people would do it just basically to make things security, but a lot of times the budget wouldn't be there if it wasn't for regulatory and compliance. So that helps drive and get budget to do these kind of testing. Where I'm at, almost 100% of what we personally do in our group is all based on PCI. Host vulnerability scans, running tests against host operating systems, including default services, common network services, specialized applications, non-standard ports, malware backdoors, Nmap discovered ports, or map discovered ports to listening processes. Nmap and NetStat can help. And so you can run several different tools. You can run Nmap, vulnerability scanners, and just kind of look at the different output you get. Credentialed and non-credentialed scans. Most of your network penetration tests are usually uncredentialed. If you're wanting to look for missing patches and stuff, we would, before some companies I worked at, we would do like a configuration review, and that's where we'd run like Nessus with credentials against a system. But your network pen tests are normally uncredentialed. Some, like internally, like your reoccurring vulnerability scans, just regular vulnerability scans, they'll use credentials because a lot of times you're not going to find vulnerabilities without access to that system. But as far as the pen test network, it's usually without credentials, but web application is very common to use credentials because you want to test for privilege escalation. And since all, applications are so much different from application to application, regardless of using similar frameworks, sometimes there's ways to bypass authentication and elevate your credentials. You're using different logic flaws and stuff you might find in the system. So unlike a web application pen test, it's good to use different levels of credentials. Because say like you could have 3 different levels below administrator, and they could do different things, have access to other areas. So you want to test at each level, credential level in the application. Network service vulnerabilities. Here's a list of here. Common services, DHCP, DNS, WINS. You're not seeing it as much, but if you got some older systems in place at a company, some older Windows boxes, then a lot of times they'll have it still running to be able to allow those legacy systems to connect. Authentication, directory services, email, file and print services, web, FTP, fax, remote access. And with this fax, a lot of network faxes are out there, so that printers can be exploited. Sometimes it's just getting the configuration information, be able to get username and passwords from file and print services. Sometimes you can use those against other systems. Vulnerabilities that are normally associated with the product or implementation are inherent in actual process. Service vulnerability scans, server service. So what are your vulnerability scans, regardless of server, workstation, or network device, is going to be pretty similar to what you're trying to do. You're trying to find vulnerable ports, outdated operating system versions, and that type of thing. Because usually where you find the vulnerabilities you're able to get in, usually some outdated software, the version of the operating system is behind. That's usually where you get weak security configurations, default credentials, those type of things. Web server database vulnerability and database vulnerability scans. So web servers, database work together. So the way they interconnect, you're able to sometimes be able to exploit those. Sometimes there's systems like XP Command Shell that are enabled on Windows Microsoft SQL servers, and you're able to possibly exploit and get access to the command line using those. Can be installed on separate computers, but sometimes they install in the same system. You take a smaller company, a lot of times they may have their everything on the same system. You could have your web server, your database server, all on one system. I mean, one of the big things back like in the early 2000s was like a Microsoft small office edition of their server, and they would have it set up for small offices that they would run their email on there and the web server all combined on one device. So whereas they mentioned their database and web servers, you could find other systems running on there. A lot of times they share the same server space, whereas now with virtualization, there's a better way of doing that. You don't have to share the exact server. You can have virtual servers, but then you'll still run into instances where they've got several different applications running on the same server. Maybe they had an older version of the or a different version of a web server or application server running. Sometimes they leave those on there and don't disable it. Sometimes it may be some easier credentials. They just kind of left it alone, didn't remove it or disable those services. So sometimes those are ways to get into systems. I see it a lot of times that maybe they're using IIS, but maybe one time they used Apache or something, but they still have that running on there. And this shows SQL Map. This is a really great tool for SQL injection. And application vulnerability scans. Web app, a script executed that are normally in a website's HTML and provide dynamic content to the user, usually running on a website standard TCP port 80 and 443. Web apps are likely to be custom made. Many types of vulnerabilities, but each app behaves differently. Use general scanner, then focus on interesting behavior. Other apps might be listening on unpredictable ports. Use NetStat to gather information. So in this case, like this, if you're doing a dedicated network pen test, then a lot of cases you're sticking with your Nessus. But if you're doing a web application vulnerability test, then you'll go to web application vulnerability testing tools like Burp Suite, Fortify's tool, their Web Inspect, or IBM's AppScan tool. So you may want to go on those in to do further testing. And here shows they ran Niktos, the tool I mentioned. And this shows the output. It'll actually show the vulnerabilities. It's all command line. So I mean, you can find like default credentials on there. It has like the database list to the vulnerability database. That open source vulnerability database is what they use for Niktos. So you can actually go out there and see articles on that. So you can actually find information that if there's exploit code on there, find out the exploit code. Here, it's telling you that the PHP version is vulnerable, and it's vulnerable to SQL injection. This tool would give you that, and then you would need to go to other tools like SQL injection to test the SQL injection vulnerability. And then you'll want to go through and validate these because you'll get false positives. Sometimes you'll run into something that says it's vulnerable on here, and when you go in and validate it, it's not always vulnerable. So a lot of these tools automate and make things easier, but then sometimes they generate false positives, which you need to go back and validate. Network device vulnerability scans, routers, switches, network access points have their own OSs, services and features, remote management with HTTP or HTTPS, SSH or Telnet. Vulnerability scan should look for services, protocol stacks, administrative access, be aware of available IP addresses. And some of these things, some of the web servers they're running on there, a lot of devices may run something like BusyBox as their web server, which has kind of been around for a while, kind of old and vulnerable. Some of the web servers that they use on some of these devices, they're not expected to be used as a web server, but may be easier to break into than like on a server. And a lot of times some network devices or appliances may be running, older, outdated versions of these web servers. Some of the things look like they mentioned here, Telnet, those are areas to look for because that's clear text. And HTTP, if it's passing stuff in clear text on these devices, you want to be using HTTPS or Telnet to access those systems. And here shows some output. Looks like, okay, this is from Nexpos. Packet crafting and vulnerability scans. Typical packet crafting techniques include raising TCP flags in unusual or illogical manner, changing source or destination port, spoofing IP or MAC addresses, changing TCP sequence or acknowledgement numbers, changing IP fragment offsets, changing the time to live value, changing quality of service values. Yeah, I learned MAC addresses. There's, anyone hasn't used it, there's MAC changer out there. You can change your MAC address. I kind of learned about that technology several years ago when I was working in application security for our web application vulnerability scanner to share against around like 3 of us. I was the one who used it most of the time, but sometimes the people in Tennessee would need to use the license. And so every time you would change machines, you'd have to contact the vendor and get a new license. So I found out that it was tied to the volume ID of the hard drive and then the MAC address. So I was able to go change those whenever I needed to use it. So that way I wouldn't have to keep getting a new license every time. But like such things as MAC address changing kind of works against some of the NACs for a computer, for some of the network protection to prevent people from unauthorized access to the network. That way, if you go plug in their network, it's usually filters by MAC address and it prevents you from getting on the network. But if you're able to get a MAC address, then you're able to take that and change your MAC address to one that's allowable on that network and sometimes bypass that network access control. Packet crafting for vulnerability scans. Here's some different tools that you can use. Nmap, hping2, OSINT Auto, Scapy. Scapy is real popular. They cover that a lot in the SANS courses. libcrafter, Yershina, Packet ETH, Colasoft Packet Builder, and BitTwist. Firewall vulnerability scans, normally conducted to identify which traffic types of the firewall allows a test of the effective rule set, rules based on destination or source port, destination or source IP address, protocol type or payload, 2 approaches, port scan the public address of the host firewall to see if ports are open or being published. If you're probing for vulnerabilities, use specially crafted packets, use firewalking against the firewall's public interface. And a lot of this stuff right here is done for network segmentation testing for PCI. You're scanning into the card data environment to make sure that there's no unnecessary ports open. So in a sense, you're testing that firewall and those rules, and that's one area that you'll do that a lot in. Packet inspection, the process of examining a network packet to see if it meets certain rules. Firewalls inspect packets to see if they should be permitted or denied. IDSs inspect packets for unusual behavior or malicious payloads, and then log what they observe. Signature anomaly-based evasion options encrypting the packet or payload using as yet unknown signatures or unrecognized crafted packets. Scanning very slowly so as not to indicate a pattern or malicious traffic. Spoofing by using trusted sources, source ports, or addresses. So this is where some of the spoofing stuff from Nmap will come in handy. Vulnerability scan, WAP vulnerability scans. So we're getting into some of the wireless stuff here. Wireless access point vulnerabilities. So WAP, let's hear some of the older techniques for that you should be using for wireless that you don't see as much anymore. WPA, WPA2, and WPS. And speaking along that, I guess, Ali, did you send out the link for the Wi-Fi pumpkin? Yeah, once you saw that, that's interesting. That's definitely an easier way to do evil twin attacks. That's pretty nice tool. Container security issues. So these like your Docker images and that Docker and that type of stuff, your containers. This is starting to get more popular. People are able to run multiple applications without causing interfering with other systems and compatibility issues. So you're seeing a lot more of that. So containers share resources with the underlying OS. Resources needed are minimal, less isolation than traditional VMs. Common security issues, kernel exploits, DOS attacks, container breakouts, poisoned or malicious images, compromised credentials and keys. Considerations for scanning for vulnerabilities. Scanners can report only what they recognize. Unlikely to use behavior analysis or identify unknown vulnerabilities. Update scanners frequently and run them often. Validate the vulnerabilities that they are found and eliminate false positives. Be mindful of limitations of the tools you use. I've seen some consultants that will run 2 different vulnerability scanners. So maybe they'll run Nessus and even run like OpenVAS, the free tool, or something like Nexpose.
Sure, that works. You actually get different results.
Yeah.
And you can investigate the differences.
That's true. I did a pen test for a company a few years ago, and they were using Nexpose internally, and one of the vulnerabilities that I found with Nessus they didn't find. So yeah, you can definitely tell the difference. Okay, when scanning for vulnerabilities, use the actual vulnerability scanner rather than generic port scanner. If you are scanning for compliance, involve your legal team. If possible, use credentialed scans to probe further into your target. When scanning different devices or application types, use tools that are specifically designed for your target. Scan firewalls to see which ports are permitted. If necessary, use specially crafted packets to evoke additional information from the firewall. Use tactics such as encryption, trusted ports, or slow speeds evade packet inspection. Scan wireless accounts. Scan wireless access points to determine security settings and encryption protocols. Educate yourself on identifying and mitigating container security risks. Keep in mind that most vulnerability scanning can identify only known security weaknesses. Do not depend on one vulnerability scanner for all your vulnerabilities. Keep in mind that vulnerability scanners often produce false positives. Be sure to validate your scan results with an exploit tool such as Metasploit. And you can validate these before getting to, there's some things you can validate that you may not be able to exploit. So you use your script, some other tools out there to validate that it's vulnerable. Scripting and pen tests. And I'm sure most of you know what a script is. Any computer program that automates the execution of tasks for a particular runtime environment. Scripts are written in scripting languages. Subset of programming languages aren't fully featured, integrated with existing software OS components. Some languages can be used as scripting languages, and programming languages can greatly enhance efficiency, effectiveness of a pen test. So these are really good. These are really good to know and to at least understand how to modify scripts. So if you don't necessarily have to, optimally you want to get to where you can write your own scripts, but you want to be at least modify scripts. And it's good to use scripts that are native to that specific operating system. Whereas with Linux, you can use Bash, and with Windows, PowerShell is pretty popular. So as far as a pen tester goes, you have access to that system. You're not having to be dependent on installing some things at that point. Python is using a Linux system. Sometimes it's on Windows, but not always on Windows. So it's always good to be able to use the native scripting languages on those systems. Example scope says test N host and subnet. You want to verify this. You could use Nmap, then manually count them, but this tedious. Script Nmap to do a scan and output a warning if a number of hosts did not match. Can also script Nmap to identify known IP addresses and output You can use scripts to create your own simple tools. Example, create your own customized port scanner rather than use Nmap. I've seen examples of this like with PowerShell to create your own PowerShell scanner. And now they're covering Bash in the slide. Default shell for Linux and Mac OS has its own command syntax, useful for scripting to automate system calls and tool usage. Any program/system can use at command. It can use at command line to invoke a script. Supports modern programming elements like loops, condition statements for purposes like automating file and folder creation, quickly scanning for actionable info and log and other text files, manipulating output of other tools, extending functionality of tools. So in the same spirit as scripts, so there's a lot of tools out there that people have written, like Sniper, that contains a lot of different scripts. It just chains those together in a script. It'll take like Nmap, run certain ports. After it goes through that, maybe it detects the live host, open ports, what to detect, and then it'll go over and use like Nikto to validate some of the services and see if they're vulnerable. So it chains different things together. So it's another area where scripts are popular. There's several of them out there like Eyewitness that's good for pulling some of the web server information, and it'll create screenshots for you. So you're not have to go through every single page on the site. It'll pull this information down, and you can kind of look through the images that it collects and see if there's any interesting web pages to examine further. So automation can save you a lot of time. Syntax similar to inputting commands line by line itself. Example, admin -hash -pull. So you can see how they're pulling admin password hash from a dump file. And outputs Windows landman Intel hashes for a dump file. First line indicates what the interpreter to use. Echo prints the message to the console. grep command searches for any line with administrator. Line is piped to cut, which trims out output. Output is sent to the file. So that's like the formatting stuff you can use with these files. So you can take whatever output that may have like IP address plus some kind of response code on there. You can actually format that to remove it down to where you just got the list of host names of the IP addresses. So this is kind of where they're using some of this to kind of clean up their output. PowerShell, a scripting language and shell for Microsoft Windows, is built on the .NET framework. Default shell on Windows 10 offers more functionality than traditional Windows command prompt. Like Bash, supports many programming elements, similar benefits to Bash, but tailored to work with Windows. Can automate the process of exploiting registry, Active Directory, objects, group policy, Windows, network stack, and more. So there's a lot of tools that Microsoft has, scripts for doing administration with, as well as PowerShell Empire is a really nice set of tools that were created for pen testing that's out there. And Metasploit is another suite of PowerShell tools. Functions through the use of commandlets. So commandlets is basically like a script. Specialized .NET commands are like small scripts. Commandlets takes verb noun syntax. Example, set date to change system's date and time. Example, clear-log.ps1. So it shows how the clearing the log script works. In Python, Python's nice because Python you can run on all systems. You can run Windows, Linux, or Unix, Mac OS. And there's a lot of security libraries out there too, and there's a lot of good books on pen testing books on Python. Excellent for beginner programming to teach programs like object-oriented programming, not a command line shell like Bash or PowerShell. Cross-platform, feature its own libraries, popular scripting language for pen testing, robust standard library, many tools written in Python, libraries for network scanning, reverse engineering, web exploitation, and many more. Python 2 included in most Linux distros. And there's a lot of tools out there that are written in Python. Even though it's a scripting language, it's pretty powerful to use for programming some applications with. Syntax is designed around the use of white space. Blocks of code are intended. No use of curly braces like Java might seem wordier than the equivalent of Bash or PowerShell scripts. You're not writing to explicitly access system commands. You're writing to Python's libraries to interact with the system. And here shows an example of a Python script. Someone asked if you need to learn Java first. Actually, you want to start with Python first. Python's easier language to learn. And Ruby, here's another scripting language, is pretty popular and was like Metasploit's written in Ruby. There's a lot of different pen testing tools written in Ruby. A lot of popular scripts out there. Similar to Python in many ways, commonly used as first-time programming language, most widely used in web app frameworks, Ruby on Rails, also used pen testing scripts. Standard library, smaller than Python, but more tightly curated. Python is built on Ruby. Extending Metasploit functionality is extremely valuable. Usually slower than Python, but may not be noticeable. And they actually added Python functionality to the newer version of Metasploit. So it'd be interesting to see how that helps.
Write your own exploit in Python and just run it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, formerly you had to do it in Ruby, but they come out with integration with Python, which is kind of nice. Like I said, it's like the first major upgrade to Metasploit in like 8 years.
What's the new version number?
5.0.
Thank you.
If you look at the other version, it'll say 4 dot something, and it's kind of tricky to install because the easiest to install the new version on is Mac OS, because you do like a MSF update, it'll install the latest version. But with like Kali Linux, you have to go in there and set some certain command or set something in your distro list for your updates to get it to install experimental, because it's not what I guess fully released yet.
I'm running a VirtualBox with Parrot in this updated today to 5.05.
That's good. Yeah, like I said, it's a little more difficult on Kali Linux. You have to allow for the experimental. That way you're able to install like stuff that's in beta release candidate that's not a full stable release. Variables, you assign values to variables in code. You may or not change during script's execution. Purpose is to store values and reference them later without hard coding. Languages like C require that you define the type of variable, the types of variables are integers, floats, strings, and more. None of the 4 languages mentioned require this. In these 4 languages, the type is definitely defined automatically. And here's some different examples of Hello World and Bash, PowerShell, and Ruby and Python. And substitution. After you assign a value variable, you reference the variable in later code, avoids hard coding values in the scripts. Bash variable substitution shows how you do that there. PowerShell variable substitution, and also an example of how you do that in Ruby and Python. Let's see, arrays, more programming goodness. Programming object that is a collection of values, collection of strings, integers, floats, etc. Enables you to store multiple values in a single variable, makes code easier to read and maintain. Use an array instead of separate values to perform operations of values. Array values can easily be updated throughout code. Arrays are ordered based on indices. Most start with index 0. Compound assignment assigns all values at once. Index order depends on the order of variables. Individual assignments assign values one by one to specific indices. Here are some examples of arrays in the 4 different languages that's been mentioned here. Common operations. Operations enable you to perform tasks or variables and values. Usually is evaluating an expression. Operators are objects that evaluate expressions. Operands are values that are being operated on. Some types of operators include arithmetic, comparison, logical, and string. Many languages use traditional symbols for operations. Example, equal compares if an operand is the same value. So you have an example right here, because 1 equal to 2 is false. Some languages use letter-based operators. Example, -GE evaluates greater than or equal to. 1 is greater to or equal to 2 is false. And one of the things I mentioned, if you're getting started out in pen testing, you don't have to know how to write scripts or know how to be a programmer, but the more you know, the better. You know, Bill start out with like Python scripts and move up from there. Because one of the things I can tell you that if you look at some of the best hackers that you'll meet in the community around here, they know how to program. They're either really script real well, or they can actually write their own code. So that's kind of give you an example of why it's important to learn that. Because a lot of these people, you know, a lot of these guys that are and women that present at, you know, the different hacking conferences and DEF CON and stuff, a lot of these people can write their own tools and write scripts to do something they need to. They may run across something new that they don't have a tool for, and they're able to write it. So that just kind of helps you advance. But there, like I said, there's a lot of tools out there that you can get by without being able to program, but to take it to the next level, I think you really need to learn how to script and program.
What kind of script would you write for a pen testing engagement that you would have told for?
Python would be the script.
I'm
Yeah.
saying, can you give me an example of the time you had to script something you didn't have a tool for?
For me, actually, I'm not that skilled at scripting because
I did that.
I just use stuff out there that exists.
I had an Excel database we wanted to input as a table.
Yeah.
New thingy. But it had more than one value in some of the cells, like 2 or 3 IP addresses.
Right.
So we did a script to make a new line for all of those, so that now it looks like a CSV stuck in a new database. It wasn't importable as it came. We had to twiddle it.
Yeah, for me, I've just modified stuff that I've, you know, been able to find, not write tools from scratch. But one of the things too is they keep coming out with things that make life easier where you don't have to script. Like for instance, like with Burp Suite, there's a lot of stuff that's web related that before Burp Suite you'd have to script it to have a script for it. But there's ways to do things without having to script it. Someone had listed an example here. Someone listed example script, take some output list of IPs and interact with an API like Shodan, have I been pwned, etc. It's a good example, Ben.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
Okay. Look at this. Some of this you kind of go through as you read, because some of this, the programming stuff, you're not gonna. This is kind of important because encoding and decoding. This is pertaining to scripting and programming, but you'll also run into this pen testing. You'll take, sometimes people will encode stuff and it's not exactly encrypted, so you can decode. It may be 64-bit encoded. A lot of times you'll see with basic authentication on HTTP, they'll just 64-bit encode it and think that the password's secure. But if you're testing through Burp Suite, you can use an offline decoder, a script or online decoders to decode information. So encoding is not the same thing as encryption. And maybe this will help out here. This where they list analyzing a basic port scan script in Python. Sometimes pre-configured utilities don't meet your needs. You may want to extend the functionality of a tool, or you can create your own tools. A team member has created their own port scanner in Python. Not as powerful Nmap, but a good start in learning scripts. You'll examine the script to see how it functions. You'll also make adjustments to tune the script. Okay. They have some questions here at the very last slide. Which type of scans do you think you'll conduct in your own environment? Okay.
Trick question.
Yeah, I guess you could, or you could put it, where do you think, what type of scans do you think you'll do when you're in our lab, our school lab environment, whenever you're doing a pen test, what kind of scan would you start with?
Wouldn't we be looking for something that helps us select a Metasploit, exploit?
That's correct. So yeah, you would look for something that's vulnerable. You would do like a port and service scan with like Nmap, looking for open ports and services.
Find out what operating system we're using, then go and search exploit and find them in there, then go to Metasploit and
Yep.
use it.
Good. That's good. Anyone else? If you're doing web application, then you may run a web application vulnerability scanner. If you find a SQL injection vulnerability, you can run something like Nmap. Do you expect to create your own scanning and testing scripts? Why or why not? Excuse me? Good answer. That's good. Anyone else?
Trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely good to learn, and it's good. I really like one of the things I like about the last book we used for class covered some scripting and stuff, but I do like that the Pen Test Plus is including this, because if you look at a lot of the SANS material, they cover scripting. It doesn't go real deep in it, but it kind of gives you a little idea of scripting. So it's really good that they're including that in this, mentioning that in the course. Not sure how deep they dive into it, but we'll find out. So that's for the slides for the lecture. Anyone having questions? So that was like 114 slides tonight. So. So yeah, once we get through this stuff, once we start getting the more technical things, we'll get to start working in labs. The lab's available now. So if anyone doesn't have any questions, then you can start working in your labs. And that can be done here or from home, either way.
So we can go from chapter 1 and start doing.
Yes. Yeah, and you can go in there, like some of the things we saw today,